All right. Hey everyone, it's Anna, and today I am so excited to be hosting the Growing Up Extraordinary panel for Latinx Heritage Month Book Fest. If you want to check out all the other panels that have happened so far and get like the entire schedule, I'll have that link down below to check out. Thank you to everyone joining me today. We're just going to jump right in with introductions. And you can tell us about your books a little bit, and we can go just like clockwise. I was like, wait, is it counterclockwise or clockwise? Clockwise.
So am I first? Does everyone see me first? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, hello everyone. My name is Amparo Ortiz. I'm the author of this book. I don't know if you can see. Oh, there it is. Yeah, kind of. It's Blazewrath Games. It's a young adult contemporary fantasy. It just came out this Tuesday, so I'm officially debuted. Amparo stands raised. Nice. Lovely. Hi, nice to see you. Did not know I had stands. Interesting. And that is basically the World Cup with Dragons, or I like to call it How to Train Your Dragon meets Warcross by Marie Lu. Nice. So it's a competition, and Puerto Rico is playing for the first time, and my main character is from Puerto Rico, and she wants to represent her country, but there's this homicidal dragon who is cursed into human form, attempting to cancel the cup. So family friendly, yeah.
So I'm just so stoked that it's out in the world finally. My name's Aiden Thomas. My pronouns are he, they, and I'm the author of Cemetery Boys, and which came out in early September. Cemetery Boys is like I call it a queer Latinx ghost story turned rom-com about Yadril, a trans boy who's trying to prove to his family and Brujex community that he's a real brujo, but because he's trans, they're not convinced the traditional rites of passage are going to work for him. Mm-hmm. So determined to prove them wrong, Yadril goes through the ceremony on his own and decides the best way to prove himself is to summon the spirit of his recently deceased cousin. However, things go wrong when he instead accidentally summons Julian Diaz, who is the school bad boy. And now Yadril and Julian are stuck together until they find out what happened and see if Julian's friends are okay, and he lets Yadril release his spirit to the afterlife.
So I'll be next. I'm Chantel Acevedo, and I am the author of Muse Squad. And Muse Squad is a middle grade, the first book in a middle grade duology. And it tells the story of Callie, who is a Cuban-American girl who lives here in Miami. And she discovers she's one of the 9 muses of Greek myth when she accidentally turns her best friend into a pop star. It happens. And so from then she meets the other muses, and 4 of the 9 are 11-year-old girls like she is. It's a really diverse cast, and they go on an adventure to inspire others and hopefully protect the future of the planet.
So great. Before I introduce myself, I just want to say, like, when I was growing up, I had none of these books. These books sound so good, and they're so full of imagination. We are in like a middle grade renaissance right now, and I am here for it. Thank you all for writing such awesome ideas and putting them all together. You know, just so wildly different than like what I grew up with. Hi, everybody. I'm Carlos Hernandez, and I am the author of Sal and Gabby Break the Universe and Sal and Gabby Fix the Universe. Spoiler alert, they just break it some more. The Fix the Universe came out in May, and I'm so happy to be here. Sal and Gabby, basically, Sal discovers when his mother dies that he cannot abide a universe that doesn't have his mother in it. So he just by force of will decides he's going to start looking in other universes for a mom to take her place. And of course, you know, when you start ripping holes in the universe, you know, mayhem ensues. But luckily, Gabi Real, like, is basically the smartest person he has ever encountered. And she's the only other person who can see what he sees. And she, along with him, starts to help him find a way through his grief and all of the other hijinks that they engage in.
All right. First off, all of you are amazing and insanely creative, and I want to know where y'all got your inspiration for your books. So, yeah, we can just like go like.
I go first. Yes. All right. So when it comes to Blazewrath games, my main concern was I wanted to write a story with dragons. I just didn't know what kind of story that was and what the point of having dragons was. And it took me a while to figure that out. It wasn't until the FIFA World Cup in 2014. I don't watch sports generally, but I do like the cup for some reason. I'm sure you can imagine the reason. Yes. I would watch the cup and I was like, I think I was watching the semifinals match and I was like, oh, it's kind of like soccer, but with dragons. And it still didn't make sense to me. So I kept thinking about it and I kept thinking about it. And then I went to Halloween Horror Nights the following year. And the scare actors, they jump out at you from like these strange corners. Sometimes you see them coming, sometimes you don't. So I imagine that having someone jump out at you to fight you is quite a way to get an audience engaged and entertained. So I was like, okay, so that's part of the sport. So there's a part that's similar to soccer and a part that's similar to combat. And that's the sport itself. And so in the world, I was like, oh, there are magical users or magic users. And my main character is neither a dragon rider nor a witch. So I wanted just a regular person be the star of the show and struggle the most.
It's just like the coolest concept. It really is.
Oh, it's so
Thank
great.
you.
I just love it so much.
Just so good. For Cemetery Boys, I actually came up with the idea, or I guess the premise is based off of a prompt that I saw on Tumblr. I was like scrolling through the deep one night and I follow a bunch of writing prompt blogs. And it was just one sentence long, and it was, what would you do if you summoned a ghost and then you couldn't get rid of it? And I was like, yeah. And it was funny because there was a bunch of people like in the replies or reblogging it being like, oh, here's this like really scary, creepy idea and like very like paranormal activity-esque. But when I read it, the first thought that I had was, yes, and what if he was really cute? So that was kind of where the whole idea sparked from, because I was like, okay, but like, and then like, what if he's cute and you're kind of like stuck with him? And it's like, oh no. And then from there, it was kind of like, okay, well, if I'm talking about Latinx boys and ghosts, then I want this to have everything to do with Dia de Muertos. So the whole story revolves around that holiday, as does like the magic system. But yeah, it came just from that little prompt I saw at like 1 o'clock in the morning.
Tumblr's a like place to find inspiration. I found amazing.
Yeah, totally.
Aiden, I love that because so many times I'll see other stories and I think, but what if they kiss? You know what I mean? Like, once your brain goes that
That's my
way,
favorite question.
you have to follow.
Make a scary story.
Yeah.
And then make them kiss. I love monster boyfriends. So what are we doing here?
Oh my god. Somebody put that on Tumblr right now. You might start a writing career.
Right. You never know. So the idea for Muse Squad came from a visit to London with my family, and I've been a couple of times, and it's my favorite city, next to Miami. And my daughter was using the restroom, and I was waiting for her, and there was two busts of Muses flanking this really beautiful staircase. And I was just admiring them and taking pictures of them. And the thought came out of nowhere, and I really think it was like Muse given. What if she'd been a child? Like, what if they'd been children? And how might the world be different if it was children inspiring us in the way that they often do? And so while I was still waiting, she was still in the bathroom. I took out my phone, started typing in notes what the story might look like, and I was off to the races from there.
That is so cool. I love all of your stories because it really shows where writers come from. You know, it's like standing by the bathroom, Boom. That's when the writing inspiration. Not like when you sit down and you're just like, okay, now I'm going to write the Great American. No. It's like standing by the bathroom,
Right.
But all of your premises, I love them because like with Amparo, you were like, in some ways you're like, what is a dragon? And how does it fit in with the way that I think about the world? Or like, what is a ghost? And how does that fit? What is a muse?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it was much more about sort of like, I think we think of science as neutral and objective, and it totally is not. It is very much subjected to the way that it's processed and the way that people think about science. So like I wanted to write a Latino science book, a Latinx science book, one that focused on the idea of like taking the mythologies and the ways of constructing sentences that are particular to people who have Spanish in their heads as well as English, and then see what kind of metaphors emerge from that. So, for me, it was very much like, instead of like a mythical mission, it was very much sort of like, so I have brujos in my book too, but Sal, because he grew up with a scientist, like, oh, I don't want people to think I'm a brujo, that they'll think I'm scary or something. And Gabi's like, I'm a freaking bruja, man. Like she's all into it. And those two different worldviews colliding is very much what I wanted to do. I wanted to basically try to capture more of the large pageant of what it means to be Latinx and put people in opposition to each other, and also just think about science in a way that was much more honest to the way science really works. That is, people with opinions and prejudices, they're the ones who are making the science, and it's reflected in their objective ideas.
So my next question is, what drew you to YA or to middle grade, and just like what really like compelled you to like write in that like demographic?
I mean, I don't know if anyone relates to this, but adult fiction is great. I just don't care about it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Wait, I have to unmute myself to laugh out loud at that. That's so great.
I mean, it's valid and it's great, but I personally, as a reader, don't connect to it as much as I maybe should as an adult. Legally, I'm an adult, so I should probably not, relate so much to maybe teenagers who are discovering their first everything, most of their first everything. And I feel like there's something very wondrous and so beautiful about doing something. You're making your first mistake in wherever, whether it's love or with family members, friendships, or with yourself. Disappointing yourself is very important. And you should disappoint yourself as much as possible, because that's how you grow and you get better and you know who you are eventually. So I feel like that was the main draw. And also I just feel like I wanted to have the opportunity to insert humor into my work, regardless of genre, because I feel like that's kind of lacking in adults, regardless of genre. So that's my personal journey.
I totally agree with everything that you just said. But in addition, for me, because especially for Cemetery Boys, I wanted to write about a trans boy's experience. And there's so little books out in the world for trans kids, especially trans kids of color, including like Latinx kids, obviously. And so we don't really have any of those like staple books yet, just because there's not enough like out there. So I wanted to like add to the canon, and I wanted there to be more stories and like different kinds of stories, because we have a lot of like contemporary coming out stories, but we don't really have genre fiction where it's like a fantasy or a sci-fi or a thriller where the main character just happens to be trans. So I want more of that. So I was like, okay, so I should write some of that. And in addition, I think because trans folks, we don't really get to explore our identities when we're actually like young teens or preteens. We don't really get that chance. A lot of us have to hide that part of ourselves for so long until like we become proper adults. So our like coming of age happens a lot later in life. And so I think that that's why so many queer and especially trans folks are so drawn to young adult novels, is because like all those experiences we don't get to have until like we're like maybe even in our 20s, if not later even. So I think that we really connect to those books, and those books are really important for us, for me anyways. So when I was writing Cemetery Boys, like I was like, okay, I want to have this like trans boy coming into himself, and I want it to be YA, and I want to like reach that audience.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that was beautiful, Aiden. Thank you.
Seriously.
Yeah, I love hearing that. So Amparo, cover your ears. I've written 4 books for adults. Bye.
The horror.
No, I've written 4 books for adults.
Sorry, not sorry.
And that was my career for a long time. My first book came out in 2005. And, you know, when I first started writing, I was also a high school teacher. And so I've always read children's literature, right? Like that's always been part of my literary diet, is reading kid lit along with genre stuff and, you know, literary, you know, historical fiction, which is what I write. And, you know, for the longest time, I would have ideas for, you know, a kid lit story. And then you sort of psych yourself out and you go, well, but I don't write that. Like someone else will write that, you know, because I'm in this lane. But I think as you get older, you start to realize, what are lanes? You know, like what is that? Like, why, you know, reject those ideas and those impulses, right? Like wanting to tell that story. And part of the reason I like middle grade and I enjoy it so much, and I think it's what Amparo and Aiden have already talked about, is that sense of kids having so much passion and having very little power to do anything about that passion. You know, they can't vote, they can't drive, you know, they have to do what their parents say, but some of the strongest feelings you have come when you're 11, you know, when you're 12, when you're starting to open your eyes to the world and you realize there is unfairness here, right? There is injustice here. When you start to notice those things, you know, it's both a thrilling feeling, I remember it, and also you feel so helpless. And so I think that when kids at that age are reading stories like this that are so empowering, it helps them to tap into their own, you know, personal power. So for me, it's been just a real joy writing in that space. And also I really love stories that are like, oh shit, I'm in a magical world. Like as a kid, like Narnia was like everything, you know what I mean? I used to go into closets and like feel the back of closets and like, maybe this time, you know, if I like the Goonies, you know, I'll slip into some pirate world, you know, or something. And it was such a little obsession for me as a kid. So being able to write that, you know, an oh no, magical world story has been so fun.
I'm kind of similar, Chantel, in that like my first book was short stories for an adult audience, and you know, I came to middle grade mostly because I got an offer. Like Rick Riordan read my short stories, and he was like, "Hey, you ever think about writing for middle grade?" And I was like,
wow.
"I'm thinking about it now," you know, because you know, like Rick Riordan asks you to write something, you write it. So I mean, that's how I came to it. But let me tell you, like what I have found in middle grade. After I got the offer, then I needed to do a lot of homework and read a lot of middle grade and kind of see and it was like, holy moly, these books are great. But they are great because not only are they doing all the things that I love in adult fiction, but there's actually a wider possibility of variety. So like, I think adult fiction, and even to some extent YA, it's become so hardened in categories that marketing teams are much more like, okay, I don't know how to market this because it doesn't fit the X meets Y formula or something like that. Whereas in middle grade, you know, I was like, you know, let me make up a new thing called Calamatrons, and Calamatrons are going to be the engine of this universe, and it's going to be really funny, trust me. And they're like, sure, go for it. You know, like to me, that sense of adventure, you can see it. And you can see it in our panelists here, like the concepts that are here and the wildness of imagination. That's the thing that I've just come to love. Also, I want to say this, like, you know, people have asked me before, like, oh, did you have to like, you know, dumb down the writing a little bit, or did you have to like, you know, write for kids? I had to level up my writing because kids read more carefully than adults because they have more time and they will just absolutely obsess over details. I was on a podcast where these two brilliant, like 12 and 13-year-olds, and they were super smart. They're like, well, in chapter 7, we noticed that you engaged in a little bit of world building. It seems to conflict with chapter 21. Can you settle this for us now? And I was like, all right, it's on. I'm ready, you know, and I did have a good answer, but but I'm glad I had a good answer and I had done like a certain kind of world building, because that's what kids do. They can really dig their nails into a book.
It's amazing. So when it comes to writing Latinx representation, there's a lot to consider with like how to incorporate like such rich cultures into your work. So like how did you navigate like incorporating your cultures into your books, and is there like any specific like aspects of them that you were able to like put in as like Easter eggs for like readers to pick up on if they are like a part of your culture and they can catch on to it?
Well, in Blazewrath games, the dragons are not only from Puerto Rico, they were born out of the actual soil. They're the only species that was not born out of an egg. So I really wanted to have a specific location when it comes to their birthplace that is very known to us here in Puerto Rico, and of course to the diaspora as well. But I also try to, of course, you make like allusions to food, allusions to music, allusions to all sorts of cultural markers. But I feel like it's just the attitude of her feeling like she doesn't belong at all times with people within her own community that feels most relatable to me personally. And I've noticed that a few of my readers have also identified with that. And I think it's because we do a lot of policing within our own communities. And I don't really have any sort of position in terms of who deserves to call themselves Latinx, who deserves to call themselves Puerto Rican in my case. But I did want to ask those questions in my book. I wanted to explore them and potentially give my character's answer, not a definitive answer. So I feel like that was something that I wanted to navigate, but I didn't really know how to do it. My first draft is like 500 pages. I pantsed the whole thing because I was just figuring everything out. And I'm like, I don't know what anything is. I just know that things blow up and no one falls in love. That's great. So I mean people fall in love, but like not my main character. But yes, and also just I wanted to do it as messily as possible because not everyone is gonna have a smooth sailing type of journey, and specifically not a teenage girl who is extremely melodramatic. So
relatable, honestly. I mean, for anybody. So for me, when I was writing this, I wanted there to be like representation from a bunch of different Latinx cultures. Like I wanted to like make it clear that like the Latinx experience is not a monolith. It's all different. All the cultures are different and they kind of come together in different ways. So when I was writing Cemetery Boys, it was important to me that the Brujeks and kind of like their lineage was Mesoamerican. It like preceded? No, it came before colonization and before, you know, we were split into countries and stuff like that. Like I really wanted it to be that this magic and these people existed at the beginning of time. And so for me, because of that, it was important that I didn't structure it to just like one country. I wanted it to incorporate like as many as I could drag in. So there's Brujeks who are from Mexico, Cuba, Haiti, Colombia, like all over the place. And even though it's set, this book specifically is set around Dia de Muertos, that being the major celebration, which is largely a Mexican holiday, there's aspects of Dia de Muertos that actually show up in several different Latinx cultures. So I did research and I was looking them up. And so what I did was I pulled different like kind of rituals or foods that people made for this holiday of kind of remembering or welcoming back your loved ones from the dead. And I brought that into the Brujeks. So when they're celebrating Dia de Muertos, you have the like kind of the Mexican staples, but then you also have practices from like Peru and Haiti, all these other different places to really like showcase how diverse and rich the Latinx culture is. So that was really important to me. And in terms of Easter eggs, no one has said anything to me about it yet. And I can't say anything because it's a spoiler, and it doesn't so much have to do with culture as it does with language. It's like a Spanish Easter egg that I like dropped in, being like, "Oh, here's a hint," and when people get it, they'll think I'm so clever. And it has to do with the antagonist, but no one has been like, "Oh, Aiden, I see what you did there." So I was like, "Was it really clever, or was it just way too vague?" So. We'll see. I'm crossing my fingers that hopefully someone someday.
I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna try so hard.
Please, God.
It's my mission now. As soon as I'm going back, I'm going in.
Oh, what a good question, Anna. For me, what was interesting about putting a Cuban American kid into Greek mythology, right, into sort of this long history of Greek mythology, was navigating some of the religious aspects of it, So I wrote a scene where she's introducing the other members of the squad to her house, and there are the portraits, her big Primera Comunión picture, and a big gold frame, it is up there along with her brothers, and having both her sort of Catholicism exist alongside Greek mythology and exist alongside comfortably took a little bit of massaging, and so there's a moment where she learns or hears that all religions matter, right? Like that there is room for all of them, and there's room for all kinds of beliefs, and that it's okay. But then I also wanted to throw in a little bit I think every sort of contemporary Cuban American kid who has one of those portraits in their house is like, dude, bro, que pena. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's this big, like, and then you're there, like, with the backlit, like these pictures that are such a part of that Cuban American growing up in Miami experience, where you go to take those portraits, and they're up there. So in those ways, I think, and I hope that Miami kids for whom that is a specific experience are going to be like, I get that. Like, I feel that. Yeah, it's embarrassing a little bit, but like Amparo said, there's the food markers and the songs and all of those things that are in there, as well as the language. And then the other thing I wanted to play with was, how do you navigate a middle grade heroine who has to be away from her parents for a long time, which is, often, traditionally in books in the past, you would see they would just, kill the parents, make her an orphan, right? Like that's like the go-to move, but I wanted this to be a story also about family. And so she lives with a mom who's overprotective, as she would be, right? Who wouldn't let her walk 2 blocks to a friend's house, who drives her there. You know what I mean? And that was my experience, and is largely the experience of, the children I know living here, And so I had to also use a little bit of magic to sort of stop time and do these things so that she's not just perpetually busted for leaving the house at all hours, because she's a Latinx little girl and she's got to, also follow those rules. And so it was fun trying to navigate all of those patterns and, permutations of the culture, which are so interesting and important and real, and still make it a magical story.
I love this so much. I had 2 first communions. I had one in a Spanish church in Sarasota, Florida called St. Matas, and one in English in Incarnation. And so my mom wanted me to do each of them. And it's so funny because like the one that was in English, it was very just like by the book, normal, nothing magical. It's like, okay, did my religious thing, whatever. In the one that I did that was delivered in Spanish. So like the suit I wore, like the one at Incarnation, it was just like, khakis or some shit like that. But like the one that I did for the Spanish one, I had a 3-piece white suit with gold epaulets. I was a glowing archangel going forward there at 8 years old. Seriously. And a magic thing happened. So like I am pretty damned atheist. Like I just like, I just don't believe that there are higher powers in real life, but I have something in my head that I cannot explain, that I cannot resolve. So preparing me for my Spanish first communion was my abuela, and my abuela, she old style Cuban, lot of saints in our house, you know, didn't quite understand because mom didn't want me dealing with that sort of stuff. But now, of course, I know it was Santeria and stuff. But back then I didn't know so much. But she had a vibe to her, you know, if you know what I mean. And you know, she would kind of like give me the one eye and be like, Carlos, don't you dare chew that communion wafer. You let that dissolve on your tongue and let it dissipate, and God will enter you. Don't you chew it. And I was like, why? It's like, you trust me, don't chew it. So I did, you know, I was a very good boy, like dressed in gold and white, went, got my first communion. Jesus dissolves on my tongue. Everything's going great. I turn to the kid next to me, and this is a kid who like was always getting into trouble and always just like being sort of like cut up and stuff. So he's chewing away like, yeah, just like chomping away on the host. And I saw blood in his mouth. And not just a little bit of blood. I saw like a churning washing machine of blood in his mouth. And I was watching it mix with the wafer in his mouth. And I was doing this, and I turn to the pew where my abuela is sitting, and she's like, see? That's why you don't chew the host. I mean, she didn't yell that, of course. She was just, she could do it all with her eye. So this is all to say, like, this is what I wanted to capture in Sal and Gabby Break the Universe. These like wild, magical, unexplainable moments that happen like in a bilingual kind of culture. And so like the book starts out with Sal coming from Connecticut to Miami. He's moved to Miami. And in Miami, he was like, you know, the brownest kid in school, and they all let him know that all the time. But he steps into Miami, and the bully that he encounters right away is like, you know, what's up, white boy? You know, and so that kind of like different skin color for different location in different contexts is something that I've encountered, and I bet many of you have encountered. Like, you know, depending on where you're sitting, people will take you and characterize you in a different kind of way. In terms of specific culture, you know, I snuck in some references to Cuban words that I was pretty sure other folks from the Latinx community wouldn't necessarily get, so made them look up stuff too. And they've told me I've had Colombian friends and Ecuadorian friends be like, what is this word? It's like, look it up. But so that sort of thing, where the richness of the particular language is definitely part of what makes the imagination, you know, and that was something that I really tried to include. And I also really wanted to make people hungry. Like that was a goal, like loading it with Cuban food. So, you know, I've been told that my description of ropa vieja has literally sent people going to Grubhub like immediately. So that I'm calling that a win.
That is like the most aggressively Cuban like Lita story I've ever heard in my life. Yeah, like, incredible.
Okay, so we kind of sort of already touched on this, but what do you hope that readers, like particularly Latinx readers, take away from your books?
I would like to start by saying that I'm so grateful I was muted, because no one deserves to know what came out of my mouth. Like the sound I made was horrifying. What do I hope readers take from Blazewrath games? Many things. Dragons are cool, and they don't have to be Eurocentric. You can put your own spin on anything, and don't be afraid to represent yourself as authentically as possible, because if I do this, then this other type of reader won't like my book, or it won't find an audience, a large audience. You never know. Just try it and make mistakes. As I said, disappointing yourself is important. I've disappointed myself as a writer many times, still do. So I feel like that's something that I also want them to take away from the story. It's not about finding a niche where other niches exist. If you don't fit in, then make your own niche, and don't be afraid of mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, that's so, how do I follow up to that? For me, it's similar, but I think I'm going to touch base on kind of like the Latinx trans experience, which can be very fraught when your language is based in Spanish, is gendered. But also for me, as like a young person trying to figure out my identity and my gender, according to books and according to media, like POC trans people didn't exist. All of the like trans rep that we had, or even like bloggers and stuff like that, were usually white and thin and kind of like androgynous, like very passing. And so when I wrote Cemetery Boys, I was like, okay, here's this brown boy who is not passing, like he isn't passing in the book. And like he exists and he's valid. And so I wanted to like carve a space, because I feel like it can be really hard to see yourself. For me, as a Latinx person who was trying to figure out their gender, it was hard for me to picture myself as who I wanted to be when I had literally no one to look to who looked anything like me. And so I think for me, writing Cemetery Boys, it was really important to have that representation, to let other Latinx trans kids, or who are just questioning their gender identity, can have like role models, or just an example to look to that isn't like this really whitewashed idea of what the media wants you to think that all trans people look like.
I love these answers. I'm so honored to be on this panel with all of you.
I was going to say that eventually, but yeah. Thank you, Chantel.
Hear, hear.
Y'all are brilliant. For me, I guess, you know, it was a real joy writing a Latinx character, a Cuban American character who resembles me a little bit and who resembles my girls as well a lot, and putting them into this magical story where she's the hero of the story, though she doesn't know it. And so Callie spends a lot of the novel asking herself, why me? Like, who am I? I'm a nobody, you know? And it takes her a long time to realize that she does matter and that she has all of these gifts within herself. And to be able to tell these stories that are globally known, right? The story of the myths of the Muses is globally known, and to be able to center a Latinx character in the middle of that, right? To assign Calliope to her, who was the first muse, right? The most powerful of the muses is Calliope, and to assign that to her felt to me transgressive a little bit, you know, in a really fun way. But also the muses have rules. If you've read the book, you know there are 9 rules for the 9 muses, and I wanted to share just some of them, not all of them, but some of them that I think that I intended them to be takeaways for kids as they were reading. And so one of them is, a muse always trusts her instincts. And in fact, I was telling my 8-year-old yesterday, just listen, trust your heart, you know, after a conversation we were having. Muse magic is just love concentrated, right? That we're all worthy of love, and that it's important to remember that, right? Inspiration knows no borders. It's a really, like I said, it's a diverse book and a diverse cast. And Callie is Cuban American, but her best friend is Venezolana. She has Haitian friends, and the squad itself is really diverse. And so that magic and inspiration can belong to anyone is important. And then I guess the last one is, muses are goddesses, and don't ever forget it. That there is power in that, and that there's power in that, in being able to help others, that there is a kind of heroism in helping others.
That's beautiful.
So I mean, these are all such terrific answers, and I guess my angle is slightly different, but my mission is basically the same, to empower the Latinx community in a variety of ways. And so Sal is a type 1 diabetic. And one of the reasons he's a type 1 diabetic is because the Latinx community in the United States is the fastest growing population for both type 2 and type 1 diabetes. And no one is exactly sure why. But there might be cultural factors involved in that maybe we can start dealing with if there's awareness. And so one of the things I wanted to build in as a gift to the community was, hey, let's pay attention to this and save a few lives, you know? So, and Sal's very good at dealing with his diabetes, you know, and that was also a thing. It wasn't going to be one of these things where, you know, he just couldn't deal with it. And it was just like all of his character was devoted to that. No, he's good at it, because I want people to be good at dealing with their diabetes. Culeco is the name of the school, and so those of you who are making a face to that name, you know the word Culeco. Culeco is the name of the school, And it is a joyous place. It is a great school to be in. I want to go to Culeco. And so sometimes you write things, you know, to put a mirror up to the society and say like, hey, watch out for this. But sometimes you want to put things in that are aspirational. And I wanted my Latinx kids to run around in a place where the teachers were great and the principal was great and the curriculum was great. And it was this launching point for all of this other stuff that they have to deal with, not just, you know, the cliched idea of like, oh, school, oh, mean teacher, blah, blah, you know, that sort of thing. In my school, everybody wants to go to detention because basically it's like an after school program. So everybody goes to detention and they build robots and they, you know, put on musicals that they invent on the fly and that sort of thing. And so, you know, that's the kind of thing I wanted to put alongside all the other stuff. So it's really important to have the Bildungsroman, the coming of age story, where you see the trials and tribulations and the difficulties, but we also need things to aspire to. We also need vision. And that's what I wanted Sal and Gabby to be, a vision for the Latinx community.
I love that. I love the way you put that. Like losing my place here. So like all of your books have like very like magical, fantastical elements, but they're all set in reality. So what was like the process like trying to incorporate all these things into the real world, and then also like what was just like your process for like world building and magic building, and like how did you go about deciding like what felt right in the world and like what didn't feel right?
Well, in my case, I have dragons and witches and wizards and magic users in general. They coexist with non-magical humans. So I wanted it to not be a secret that these creatures and these mythological beings were around us, because I feel like that's overdone. And I wanted to do something that was in your face in terms of that exposure and that cohabitation or coexistence. And that was difficult because I'm like, okay, so this is normal, but how long has it been normal? Why is it normal? How are people okay with this? Like, why is no one trying to hunt dragons down? Why are witches just walking around with their wands out and like no one is arresting them or trying to, you know, hurt them or disarm them? So that took a long time. Like I said, it took me, I didn't say actually. I only said that it was like 500 pages, the first draft, but it took me 12 months to draft it. There were some hurricanes in the middle of that time period, but for the most part, it was just me being very slow about it. And also, I felt like in terms of the dragons and their magical abilities, I wanted to make them specific to the countries of origin. I wanted to use any sort of, again, cultural marker from that specific country into that specific species. And in terms of the witchcraft and the magic on the human side, I wanted to divide them into levels, but put a limit on the lower two levels. So you start out as a copper wand witch or wizard or magic user, and that person can only manipulate elements. And then the silver wands can manipulate elements, but also create them. And the gold wands are the highest tier, and they can create, manipulate, but also destroy. And those are like dragons' worst nightmares because they have the magical strength to kill dragons. So that was basically what, and actually the witchcraft side of it was very easy and very fast for me, but the dragon side of it was the longest.
Yeah, for me, it was actually a little bit easy. Like once I figured out that I wanted everything to take place around Dia de Muertos, what I did was I like took like practices that we already do during Dia de Muertos, and I just made them a tangible, like literal thing. So when it comes to like having marigolds around and like using the sugarcane arches with the marigolds on it, we do that in the cemeteries to make like an archway. I don't know why I can't talk right now. To pass through from the afterlife back to the mortal world. And so it was really just taking that belief that we already have and then making it very literal. Like the Brujex, they do that in their cemetery, and then like literally when their loved ones come back, they pass through that arch. Or like how the smell of marigolds, you know, they use that to like, so they can follow it back to the land of the living. So it was actually pretty easy for me because I just wanted everything so steeped in the tradition of Dia de Muertos. I was like, I'm just going to take this magic that we already have and I'm just going to make it very literal. So that was really great. And then the more creative part came when it came to like the actual Brewhex powers, when they aren't celebrating this holiday, which is the men can summon and release spirits to the afterlife, and the woman can heal the bodies and souls of the living. And so that, it was like tapping into like brujeria and santeria. And then again, it was just taking like these practices and beliefs that we already have and then just making them like really work, like work in a way that you can see and hear and touch. And that was really fun to like take these traditions that we already have in our culture and then to really just give them a literal power.
For me, what was a lot of fun about the world building was that I got to play in a sandbox that was already sitting there, right? So when you're messing around with Greek myth, like a lot of those stories are there, right? They're there and they're very well known. So the tricky bit was how to change those stories, right? So that they work for this incarnation of the Muses and these kids. And so one of the things I had to do was, like retire the gods, right? They're all like in semi-retirement and just kind of get rid of them, because if you have, Hades popping in every once in a while, then it changes sort of the power dynamics. And I wanted them to have a lot of agency in this story. And so I semi-retired the gods, had to sort of have another look at the afterlife. And it's funny because Aiden was talking about no one discovered your Easter egg, and I spent all this time writing about sort of Callie's aunt, because Callie's also grieving an aunt who has passed away, and she visits her in the afterlife, and her aunt's always on a body of water and always on a rowboat, and no one has been like, right, that's the river Styx, and like she's the ferryman, and like no one has said it, and I'm like, I worked so hard coming up with that.
Look at Anna's face right now. Just look at Anna's face.
No one noticed all my hard work. but like stuff like that you have to sort of work around, a little bit when there is an existing mythology there. So a lot of the world building was just revisiting those old stories and asking myself, okay, can the Muses do battle? And then discovering, a story in Ovid where they actually do fight the sirens and strip them of their feathers. You know what I mean? And once you read that, you're like, oh yes, it's on now. They can actually fight, like they are more than just, I inspire you, right? Like they move and through the world, physically in interesting ways. And so the world building was just so much fun because it was sort of research heavy for me. And I don't know, I just had a great time doing it.
It's so cool. I also love being last because it gives me so much time to think and revel in your ideas. So like the way that I normally think about world building is there are basically three approaches. One, the heavy research one, which I would say like Aiden and Chantel, you kind of engaged in. There is the, build out the rules, almost like a second science system. And Amparo, it sounds like you kind of did that, where how things lock in with other things. And there's a third way that I think it gets less play these days, but is actually my favorite. And it's the numinous magic reward system, where things happen and they carry all the breath and the smell of magic, but you don't know what the hell is going on. And the reason why I wanted that for Sal and Gabby is because it's a science book, and we treat science again like this, this is ontological truth, blah, blah, blah. But really, we don't know what the hell is going on. A lot of times what happens is we see a phenomenon and then we try to describe it, and we get it wrong for about 700 years, and then somebody makes a little bit of progress and then they mess it up, and then nuclear war happens and all that information goes away. Like that's like the trajectory of science, and we treat it like a monolith, and it definitely is not. So Sal and Gabby's powers are more numinous. They are much more about like, wow, I can do this thing, and then these wild things happen, and what should I do? Now that this is a fact of the world rather than an explained, phenomenon, like what do I do with this power? And I think I'm just like a big fan of like numinous, hard to describe, ethereal, nebulous kinds of magic.
I love the way like you guys have like different approaches to it, and just like you guys like have like some similar approaches, but like you guys have like a very distinct like way of going about it, and I love it. So like as writers, like we tend to like put a lot of ourselves into the people that we create, and I am curious, like, who do you think like you like put the most of like yourself into, and like who do you think that you're most like? Like, are you like most like a lot of your characters, or is there just like certain people that are just like you, and just like, you know, you just like put so much of yourself into them?
I feel like I don't want to say this out loud, but I'm very similar to the antagonist or the villain, in the sense that I'm very honest. And if you bother me, I will tell you that you're bothering me, but not in a mean, cruel way. I'm just like that with people who, for example, harass other people or are just harming others. I'm very like, how do I say this in English? I don't know how to say this in English, but I'm very entrometida. Like I'm like, I butt in a lot. Is that how I want to say it? Yes. I butt in a lot. And I think that that's very me, but also Lana, my main character, is like that. She's also a little bit more melodramatic than I am, a lot more melodramatic than I am. But it's because she knows she doesn't know who she is. She thinks she knows who she is, and she knows what she wants. And she goes after it, and there's no plan B. Like, she just has plan A. And if she doesn't get what she wants now, she's very angry about it and sobs to her best friend. And her best friend, of course, is comic relief in a way, but also that support system that everyone deserves, regardless of who they are. But yes, I have a lot in common with my villain. I will say no more. Aiden, you're...
Yeah, for me, I feel like when people see Cemetery Boys and they like learn that I'm a trans Latinx author, they're like, "Oh, so you must be exactly like Yads." And I am not at all like Yads. Like, maybe when I was like younger, but I was kind of mean when I was a kid. And Yads is very sweet. And yeah, I'm trying to think. We don't have a super lot in common other than like being like very emotionally invested in like the world around us. But my friends will tell you that I am very much like Julian. I am incredibly chaotic. I can't sit still. I have this whole time I've been playing with this because I have like my attention span. I have to be doing something with my hands, otherwise I'll be off doing God only knows what. So I think when people first meet me, I can be like really shy and kind of scared of everyone in person. But then like as soon as I open up, I'm really that agent of chaos. Like, I sing loudly in the car. I just kind of do whatever I want to do. I'm off this way, I'm off that way. I get emotionally attached to like piñatas in grocery stores all the time, and my friends have to like literally keep me away from it. And that's another like very Julian thing. So yeah, I think everyone just kind of assumes that me and Yads are like the same person, or that I modeled him after me. And while we have like similar experiences, it's really Julian and I who are these like chaos children just running around causing a muck.
I'm also a child, and I related extremely like strongly.
Yeah.
Project Cube, and I've been just like messing around with it, like you and me.
Yeah.
Same wavelength.
I think for me, I put myself into all the muses in some way. And I think you just I think we always do. We put a little bit of ourselves in every single character, even if it's a little side character, because we're tapping into some reaction that we've had in the past. But I think when I think of the Muse Squad, it's definitely Callie. Obviously, she's Cuban American. She's Miami. Her family structure is similar to mine. She's full of self-doubt, and I was able to really tap into that. Talia is the muse of comedy, and she injects humor, especially when things are stressful. And it's a tendency that I have as well. Try to make others laugh when they're feeling anxious or bad. And sometimes that doesn't come off as well. So I struggle with it, and Talia does too. Nia is the muse of science, and she's the rule follower. And I'm such a rule follower. Like I can't help it. Like I'm like that teenager, you know, when your friend tries to like, let's sneak into another movie. And I was always like, no, we couldn't possibly. Like, that is me. And then Mel is the muse of tragedy, and she, you know, bless her, if she has a star sign, it's Cancer, like mine, which means like she's like weeping all the time and feeling all of the feelings. And it was just a delight putting some of those elements of myself into all of them. I love them all so much. Maybe I was working through some stuff. I don't know. That might be the case, but There's a little bit of me in everybody.
Yeah, so I mess up in very much the same ways that Sal messes up. Like very well intentioned, but oftentimes like thinking like I can create this Rube Goldberg machine of a way to solve a problem instead of like just being very simple about it, and then 20 other things go wrong, but it kind of works somehow, and something good comes out of it. So I have to say, like I've very much thought about like Sal has many of my tropes of speaking, and also he messes up like I mess up. So there's definitely that connection. But some characters, you know, like I said, you write them to kind of aspire to, and so like in the second book, I wrote you know, a character named Voragine, who I hope is going to be an inspiration to everyone in terms of like how you can be very calm in the face of danger, and how you can talk to people, you know, in ways. And also Voragine is a toilet. And that really sort of like also is my personality. Like the smartest, kindest character in all of my books is going to be a sentient toilet.
Okay. So
You're like, okay.
oh, yeah. So like this is like my favorite question. So it's like a two-parter. So like with this festival, we're celebrating Latinx authors. If you were to collaborate on a book with another Latinx author, who would it be? But like another like version of this, like you can answer both or just one of them. If you were gonna like cross over your book with another book by another Latinx author, who would that be? Like your worlds are colliding, your characters are teaming up, and like what would that look like? So like who would you want to team up with?
Can I say everyone on this panel? Yes?
Stole my answer!
Good. Not to spoil anything, but maybe I'm already doing something with someone here. I don't know. But yes, I think that if I were to crossover, I like doing crossover titles, like Blazewrath games, but like Blazewrath something else. For example, Adam Sass, Surrender Your Games instead of Surrender Your Sons. I'm silly, but I feel like I wonder what any of Daniel Jose Older's characters would do in this world, because magic is also prevalent in his stories, specifically his young adult stories. I feel like that would be interesting to see them like having to fend off dragons instead of what they usually fend off. So yeah.
She's going to think I'm stalking her at this point, because my answer to this is always Zoraida Cordova. I am obsessed. And reading Labyrinth Lost was the first time that I ever saw Latinx culture represented in a fantasy book. I was like, I wasn't aware that we could do this and that anyone would buy it. So that would be really cool, and especially because, you know, it's Brewhex, and like the Brooklyn Brewhouse meets the East Los Angeles Brewhex would be like super cool and badass. So yeah, that's that would be incredible. I would love that.
I love this question too. I think if I had to pick someone that's not on this panel to collaborate with, definitely Natalia Sylvester. Her latest book, Running, was so fabulous. I'm so impressed by it, and I can't wait for her next one. And she gets Miami so right, and she's a genius. So I would love to work with Natalia, collaborating on something new. But if I had to do a crossover, I would love to cross over Adriana Cuevas's
the total eclipse.
Nestor Lopez.
The total eclipse of Nestor. Because here's why I'm taking Nestor. I'm claiming Nestor because there's no muse of animals. Like there's like not a muse who speaks to animals and who does that kind of work. And I feel like they would include him. Like Nestor would be a great member of the squad. And so that would be my favorite crossover.
I love that.
Yeah.
So I would also like to have Cuevas on my team, because that voice in Nestor Lopez fits so well with the Sal voice, you know, and just having those two in conversation would be so terrific. I will also say, though, that Jen Cervantes, is, you know, another Rick Riordan Presents author, we actually kind of do have a crossover that I can talk about now, because all the Rick Riordan Presents authors are going to be in an anthology. This was announced like a couple of days ago. And we have, you know, we all have stories together from our worlds, but guess what, everybody? I get to tie them all together because my world is about universe hopping. And so Sal and Gabby are going to be appearing in different people's stories, including Jen Cervantes's.
That's gonna be awesome.
You're the
How am I
Doctor
just
Strange of the Rick Riordan universes. You're the Doctor Strange of the universe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I love it.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I'm so excited for that. Oh my gosh. Okay, so trying to find the questions. So like on the subject of writing books, what advice do you have for anyone who's looking to write YA or middle grade, and just like this can be like specific to like writing fantasy or just like in general, just advice that you guys have?
Don't do it. I'm kidding. Read a lot and get to know yourself as both person and writer, because your writing is informed by your life experiences and what you shape yourself to be as a person. And vice versa. So I feel like expose yourself to what you wish to write in, and also try to be as true to yourself as possible in all areas of your life.
I feel like when I get asked this question, people never like my answer, because usually when I get asked this, I'm like, okay, well, here's what it's like revising, and like, here's how you can build character depth, and like, you know, talking about arcs and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, if you want to edit, this is a really good way to edit. And then people go, oh, I haven't written it yet. And I'm just like, okay. So my advice is to finish your first draft because you can't publish your book. You can't make it better unless you get it on the page. The first draft is supposed to be shitty. Like, that's okay. Like, it's allowed. We all understand that. But you have to get it down. You just have to get it on paper, because then you can make it better. So my advice is to finish your first draft. And NaNoWriMo is coming up. So you have a month full of support, and I'm going to be a coach for one of the weeks. So do NaNoWriMo, help yourself finish your book, and then we can talk about the nitty-gritty.
Oh my God, yes. I direct a creative writing program at the University of Miami, and this is what I tell them. If you do not finish your thesis, you can't revise it. You don't know what you have. You don't know if your cake tastes good until you've baked it. So bake the cake.
Great, now I want cake. Chantel, oh my God.
Sorry.
Why?
It's the Aiden, that's like the best, that's it. Like, just do it. But I would also say read a lot in the genres you want to write for, and also get in touch with your inner child, because I think there's a lot of folks who try to write for children and end up preaching to them. And kids don't want to be preached at. They know what the deal is, right? They can sense it from a mile away. So get in touch with your inner child. Remember what it was like to feel that way, to feel empowered and disempowered, and all of those experiences, and read a lot. So that would be my tip.
So my biggest piece of advice is do a headstand.
Here we go. Main event.
2 minutes, like, all right.
Applause, ladies and gentlemen.
You're so good at it. Carlos. You're so
Applause.
talented. That was so good.
I've been practicing. You're so good.
Oh, perfect.
Oh my
It
gosh.
is innate.
So good. Yes.
No,
Congratulations.
but this actually does fit in with my answer, because my answer, along with everybody else, so like I teach creative writing. I give the advice that I give to poker players as well. You know, poker players don't win with big hands. They win by outlasting their opponents. They sit there and they get it done. The word that they use is a Yiddish word, sitzfleisch. Like, sit your meat down. Your meat goes in the chair, your fingers go on the keyboard, you start typing, and you don't stop. You don't lift that meat off the chair until you're done. That's sitzfleisch, and it is such good advice. But that said, take joy. Like, to me, it's like the first draft gets done when you are making yourself laugh or feel things, or you know, you wander away, and then you're thinking about things, and you come back and you're like, wait, you know, and you know, you let the back brain do a lot of work in the shower, and you're constantly writing your novel even when you're not in front. See, this is when you're in the right space. And so put yourself in a position to take so much joy in the thing that you're creating that it envelops like 30% of your brain all the time. And it is always at work, even when you're not
I love that way of looking at it, and just like I'm always just like thinking like, what's like the next thing I'm gonna put down, and like I also need the motivation because I am like nowhere near finishing a draft, and I need to like zero in on that. But like, I appreciate just like
NaNoWriMo.
I'm doing it for sure.
And love your sentences. Just love them, you know, as you write them. Love them like little babies.
I love that. So this is like kind of just like tying into like advice. So like in particular, like what advice do you have for Latinx writers and just like things that you've learned from your experience in publishing?
Just to echo what everyone has already said, we are not a monolith. We have different experiences. And even if we don't share an experience that is commonly experienced or had, you're still valid. You're still part of our community. We want you here, and we want you to find your joy and find your path, whichever it is or whatever it is. So my advice for anyone who wants to pursue writing within our community is to eyes on their own paper, because a lot of people want to pit you against others just because there's this Highlander mentality, as I believe L.L. McKinney is the one who quoted, I'm quoting her, I think, that she says there's this Highlander mentality that there can only be one, and that one is going to be the voice of all of us, right? And I am very happy whenever someone is successful, but I'm also like, where's the support for others that are coming? Like, not just, for example, people debuting in this year, like Aiden and myself. Chantel, you're debuting in middle grade this year, correct? So it's like, we're not debuting in the best of times, but I personally have felt supported, and I personally have felt like I deserve to be here because people want me to be here. So just find your path or carve out your path. But if no one is helping you, then that still doesn't mean that you don't belong here. Just keep going, or just keep swimming, to quote Pixar.
Yeah, that's incredible. Especially this idea of like being pitted against each other. There's an evergreen tweet that I feel like I have to make every like 3 months or so, and that's people within my like other queer writers, other trans writers, other Latinx writers. They're not my competition. They are my community. So you should be pulling people in rather than trying to like lift yourself up. Anyways, we're here for each other. And as far as like writing advice for Latinx folks, like lean into it, like be as Latinx as you want, like be obnoxious about it, like go for it, because don't worry about if you have like appeal to like non-Latinx readers, because the readers that you do hit are going to love and appreciate it so much. So much of the love that I get on Twitter and Instagram, it's like, oh, this like one really like specific Latinx part, it made me feel so happy. It made me feel so seen. So don't be afraid to like be yourself and like represent yourself and your experiences in your books.
Yeah, my advice would be very similar too. Would be escribe sin pena. Like write without shame. Like write yourself and your culture and the stories you want to tell boldly, and know that there are no limits to it, right? So if you want to write Greek Latinx myths, do it, right? Like again, there's no limits, and you know the world is very quick to assign limited ceilings of possibility over your head, and it's your job to push those away, right? Like there are no ceilings of possibility. You go as far as you wish, and also that you can't control publishing, but you can control your writing. So write like the wind, right? Just keep at it, keep reading, keep writing. Don't worry about the next step. Just write the best story you can.
All terrific advice. Follow all of that advice, and then also find your allies. You know, one of the things that you will find is that some people will simply carry prejudices with them that you just cannot deal with. I remember when my first book, this is the collection of short stories, came out, and my publisher was contacting different Barnes and Nobles to try to get them to stock it and things like that. And you know, he was contacting a place somewhere in the Midwest, and like, oh, I don't think we have many Cubans, you know, so we're not going to stock your book because it has Cuban in the title. And it's just sort of like, you know, those limitations, like that's where you move on from immediately. Like, don't spend any time being like, oh, they don't like me or whatever. Those people are wrong. Someday they'll catch up, we hope. And if they don't, then they will have missed out on my grand literature that I could have offered them. More's the pity for them. But seriously, you find your allies and you stick with your allies and you raise yourself up together. I hope I'm not speaking out of turn by saying, the people on this panel, we're allies. We want to raise people up, because think about it. Like, even if you're fast, even if you're writing a lot, like you put out 1 or 2 books a year, like you have so many more books that you can read, than you can write. I want to see an absolute blossoming of Latinx literature, because I want to keep reading these stories and I want to see them from all of these different angles, and there's no way, like, even if I was number 1, which I'm not, but even if I were, like, I don't even know what that would mean, because it's like number 1 in what? Like it's like it's a false idea to say like the number 1 writer, like by what standard, by what limited, closed blinder standard are you using to measure this sort of thing? Instead, just welcome the variety. Just like, imagine, like, you go to a grocery store and you're only allowed to eat the number 1 apple, but you want to make an apple pie. That's not enough for an apple pie, man.
I love all the conversation around like just like community and just like sticking together, because like it's a tough industry. It's a tough like place to be in. But just like one of the things that like encouraged me was like coming into this community, like I had all this doubt about like my like ability to like tell my own stories, and just like surrounding myself with like people like you all and all of the amazing readers in this community have just been like the like support I need when I have like my bits of like doubt, just like assuring myself that there's like so many people here that like get where I'm coming from and just like get what it's like, and there's a lot of solidarity, and I appreciate just like having the opportunity to like surround myself with people like you all. So the like I remembered it and then like I completely lost it. My memory is so bad today. So the so like circling back to like your books, so like Cemetery Boys, Bruhex are assisting spirits in traveling to the afterlife, and Sal and Gabby explores alternate universes, and Blazewrath Games puts dragons and dragon riders to the test, and Muse Squad is full of magic. And like circling back to your books, is there anything like that you have not explored in fantasy, in like sci-fi, that you really want to like venture into, or like is there like another genre that you're really curious about? And I'll kind of lead into my next question after that, which is what's next for you guys and what are you working on?
I mean, I want to write more horror. I feel like fantasy is my home. Fantasy is my home, but I made a joke the other day that the title for the sequel was, I mean, it wasn't a joke, it was real, it was true. But we made jokes after I made the statement known to the world that it's too much. It's too not in tune with Blazewrath Games. It's a little bit too much. And I'm like, well, that's definitely reflecting a darker part of me. But I definitely want to venture either horror or darker fantasy. And in terms of like what I would personally like to write within those worlds, I feel like we need more disability rep. We need more queer rep. I would love an all queer cast for like any genre, but imagine a fantasy saving the world type of situation. I personally would feel like I'm claiming that space. So I want other people to write that one, and they can write it better than me, especially disability as well. And also I would like to explore more consent, healthier depictions of consent, because I feel like that's one of my favorite things to read about in any genre, specifically romance, of course, but in anywhere. I'm like, is this actually consensual? That's what I would like to explore as well. And what's next for me? Oh, yes. A lot. Yay. But also, more importantly, book 2, the sequel. Yay.
Yeah, gosh. For me, there's so much that I want to explore in fantasy and just kind of in general. Within fantasy specifically, I would love to really delve deep into Mesoamerican myths and kind of bring those to the forefront. I'm also just so obsessed with death and death gods. Like every time I message my agent and I'm like, how many times can I write books about death gods, do you think? There's like a lot. Is that like okay? And I'm interested in everything. I want to write horror, I want to write contemporary, I want to write thrillers. I'm all over the place. Like I would love to write a graphic novel, I would love to write comics. I want to do everything, which I think just goes back to me and my brain and how it's all over the place. So I have all these all over the place ideas that I want to play with. In terms of what's next, my second book, which is actually the first book that I sold, Lost in the Neverwoods, is coming out March 23rd, 2021. And that's another fun thing that I got to play with. It's a very dark fantasy. It's quieter and it's creepier and a lot darker than Cemetery Boys. And it's also kind of like a really close like heart book for me. Wendy, my main character, it's a dark retelling of Peter Pan. Did I say that? Okay.
No, but we all knew it, I think. Yeah.
So Wendy, that character and what she's going through in that book is something that's very close and personal to me. So I hope that people really enjoy that one. It was very fun to write. And in terms of what's next, I have another manuscript written that I'm working on, which is a trans college-age rom-com. And I also have so many files in my like WHIP folder on my Google Docs that's just like it's all like literally all over the place. So who knows what's going to be like the next actual thing linearly? Yeah.
I love that idea, Aiden, of the Wendy story. Because I'm obsessed with reimaginings. They're like my favorite thing are reimagining. So one day I'll write one, I think. One day I'll write one. One day there'll be a story that grips me and there'll be questions about that story that I'll have to answer in a narrative form. So I would love to do that. I would love to write a YA as well. And I have notebooks full of ideas and drafts of things, and so hopefully that will happen. I also am intrigued lately by mad scientist stories, especially trying to think of them as sort of a little spooky and at the middle grade, level. A mad scientist story I think would be a lot of fun to write also. And in terms of what's next, Muse Squad 2 will be here in July of 2021, and I just shared the cover with everyone yesterday. And thank you to everyone who retweeted that and was so happy for me. And I'm happy too. It's beautiful. So look for Muse Squad 2. They're New York City bound. I'm taking them to Queens. I'm taking my talents to Queens. And that's where Muse Squad 2 is set. So I'm looking forward to sharing that with everybody.
Awesome. I'll have to open my Airbnb so they can come stay with me. All right. Yeah. So I like writing weird shit and I want to write more weird shit. So, I like to cross categories and do weird things. So it's almost better to try to describe my next project than to try to categorize. I guess it would be called urban fantasy. But so what I'm imagining is that all the rats in New York each know exactly one word, either in English or Spanish. And together they can come together and have like a conversation with humans. So basically what these rats do is they come up and they come to the youngest member of a family of exterminators, Incendio Matanunca. The Matanunca family, they're exterminators, but they don't exterminate anything. They just negotiate with the rats because they're basically rat whisperers. But the family's been incapacitated and only Incendio's left, and the rats need him to come down into the sewers to exterminate the dragon that has taken up residence and is determined to wipe out all of rat kind. So this is my premise for my next story, and I am extremely excited about having 80,000 rats that basically form a college level dictionary. Each of them assigned one word that they can basically speak to each other.
So cool.
That is the most creative thing I've ever heard, I think.
I'm excited. I'm really excited. Okay, that is it for today. Thank you all so much for joining me and talking about your books. If you guys have not read them yet, all of them are linked down below for you to check out. They're amazing. Please read them. Thank you all.
Oh,
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Anna.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you, Paola. Thank you, panelists. You all are so great. I love you all. You're seriously great people.
Oh, you are too. Love you all. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Paola. Thank you, everyone, for watching.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Wanda.
guys.
Thank you, chat.
Bye.
Bye.
How do I leave?
Bye.
You click that leave student. There you go. Thank you, Anna.